Hello, and welcome to Digital Decode with Carla. My name is Laura Walubengo, and I am your host for this podcast, where we'll be diving into anything that has to do with technology in Africa. And the aim of this podcast is for us to be able to decode anything that's happening digitally on the continent. As you know, the future of this continent is steeped in technology, and so you better be listening. What we're trying to do here is make sure that you're enlightened and inspired. Hello, and welcome to Digital Decode with Carla, yet another episode with your host, Laura Walubengo. And we are here today with the United Disabled Persons of Kenya in a special feature where we are talking to a lot of tech companies ahead of the Innovate Kenya Tech Summit happening in March. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce the guests today. We have Sandra Nyawira and we have John Wambua. Welcome, karibu sana. I think without going into too much detail, please introduce yourselves and tell me what you do. We'll start with you, Sandra.
Thank you so much, Laura, for having us here today. My name is Sandra Nyawira, working with United Disabled Persons of Kenya as a disability inclusion advisor, supporting programs centered around engagements with the young people and programs also centered around employability skills of persons with disabilities and specifically the young people. I am a young woman with visual impairment and, of course, really passionate about matters inclusion. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. John, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Laura, for the opportunity. Name is John Wambua. I work with the United Disabled Persons of Kenya, the UDPK. I work in the programs and also in the communication. And also in the organization, I do accessibility, ICT related kind of programs. So also I have a lot of interests around tech and inclusion. Thank you.
Okay. So maybe you can take it just from the top. What exactly is UDPK?
United Disabled Persons of Kenya, UDPK, is an umbrella organization of organizations of persons with disabilities in our country. UDPK was started way back in 1989. I think as of now, we are more than 3 decades old. We'll be celebrating our 36 years, I think, next month or so.
Nice.
And UDPK mandate majorly is to advocate and champion for the rights of persons with disabilities as it has been enshrined in our legal and policy frameworks, just to ensure that persons with disabilities are involved and participate on equal basis as everyone in the countries and development and center in life, so to speak.
Okay. So I think when Sandra was talking, she was mentioning mainly the youth. So as UDPK, are you focusing specifically on youth or it's just you, Sandra?
UDPK operates on a scope that has the intersectional approach. So approaching individuals with disabilities with the diverse identities that they do come with. So UDPK has programs centered around young people, has programs centered around women, has programs centered around, children. So essentially, we work with persons with disabilities in their diversities. And of course, that also takes into consideration the diverse disabilities that we do have. So we're not just centered around programming for young people, but it's persons with disabilities in general.
Okay. Yes. So I think one buzzword that you probably hear a lot in your office is inclusivity. What is it that you feel persons outside of your circles really don't understand when it comes to inclusivity? You can go first, John.
Yeah, sure. The word inclusion, the term inclusion definitely means different things to different persons. But us, in the space, the thinking is that the term inclusion is misunderstood by the greater public to mean to mean that if I provide physical accessibility, for example, if I were to provide ramps for you, or if I were to provide a lift for you, and if I were to provide perhaps a job opportunity for you, and if I were to say persons with disabilities have been represented in a certain area, that has been meant to mean inclusion by the greater society. But using those measures to measure inclusion, I think that's where the misunderstanding comes in. Because ideally, inclusion is deeper than just providing these things I've talked about. It's deeper than providing accessibility, it's deeper than providing representation, it's deeper than just providing the jobs. Because inclusion then will mean that it is the change of attitude, right? It is breaking down barriers that prevent persons with disability from participating in the society on an equal basis with others. So in the inclusion, the change of attitude, the removal and elimination of systemic barriers should be considered when people are defining what inclusion is. Because this defining, actually, we have seen it sort of undermine the promotion of participation of persons with disabilities in the country. You go to an organization, you see some people, they say they have practiced inclusion. They'll say that our organization is inclusive, but the criteria they are used to measure that inclusion does not include the key component of that inclusion, which is the attitudinal change, the change of behavior. So I think in that aspect, maybe there's a misunderstanding on what inclusion is, and just as to finalize on the misunderstanding bit of it, I think also a major part of misunderstanding comes in when the greater public thinks that inclusion is some sort of broad-based something, like inclusion is something that you can apply to everyone equally. Like once I do something to that group and I provide something for them, then that group, that category, those identities are already included. Inclusion is more than that. Inclusion actually goes down to understand that each individual, they have their own needs. And totality of inclusion is to look at those needs and how to meet them, not looking at inclusion as one-stop shop or umbrella term for those different identities. So I think in those two aspects, perhaps there's a little bit of misunderstanding what inclusion means.
That's very interesting because I've never really looked at it that way. I mean, I can imagine for a building, if they see that they have a ramp, they're like, okay, fine, I'm inclusive, I've included everybody. But what you said about attitudinal change, I think is a big one. I don't know let me direct this to you, Sandra. How exactly can somebody's attitude change unless you have exposure to persons with disability, unless you have exposure to the different identities that you've spoken about? How do you tackle that challenge?
So attitude, again, being the biggest barrier towards disability inclusion, and how do we tackle that? And I think John sort of referenced the whole issue around meaningful engagement of persons with disabilities, and of course, the representative organizations. So access to information around what exactly is disability inclusion is very key. And we do recognize that within the sector, even as we talk about inclusion, then there are those stereotypes also around inclusion, just as John has mentioned. So also ensuring that we are aligning ourselves towards, the rights-based approach of what inclusion is, the one that recognizes that persons with disabilities are human first and inclusion is a right. So, and all of these are aspects that you can only get while interacting, and engaging persons with disabilities and their representative organizations meaningfully. So when having conversations where, whether be it organizations within, for example, the public sector, the private sector. You know, how often do we engage persons with disabilities in these discussions? And it doesn't even have to be that on such an official basis, even within aspects like churches, schools. So how are we socializing our society, even kids from a young age, in terms of what is disability, who are persons with disabilities, how do we accommodate the diverse disabilities that we do have? So it's all around the information that is out there and how intentional we are as a society to want to learn about what is disability inclusion from a rights-based perspective. Because then most times you will find that the larger population of the society have their own understanding of what disability inclusion is. And then breaking the misinformation then becomes a challenge if they're not making the deliberate attempts to want to associate with persons with disabilities, to then have a deep and broad understanding in terms of, you know, what disability inclusion is, or even interacting with, you know, the documents that we have that enshrine the rights of persons with disabilities. You know, we have the UNCRPD, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Just recently, the Parliament passed the Persons with Disabilities Act 2025, our very own constitution, Article 54. All of those are documents, legal documents that talk about, you know, the rights of persons with disabilities, and they have denoted what disability is and who persons with disabilities are, and of course the accommodation needs that are then necessary to ensure that they have equal opportunities within the society, just like anyone else. Yeah.
So I guess if you look at it that way, then it's good that you have the technicalities sorted, or it's good that there is a framework. If somebody needs to adopt to it, then they can actually do that.
Right.
But I think what you mentioned earlier about churches and schools and having that level of education is even more important, because I mean, kids, in fact, they ask the harshest questions.
Right.
Yeah.
So by the time you can
Yeah.
get a kid to understand the different identities, that would probably go a much longer way.
Yes.
So now let me take you back now to this particular conversation and what I want to focus on in technology when it comes to improving inclusivity and improving inclusion.
Right.
Would you say that technology can act as an equalizer? If I pose that to you as a statement, would you agree or disagree with that statement? I'll start with you, John.
I will strongly agree.
Okay.
I will strongly agree with the statement, because then what technology does is that it provides the necessary tools and the facilities to person with disability to participate on an equal basis with others. In a way, technology is a leveler. It levels the playing field. All of a sudden, now a person with the disability is able to log into the government website and apply for the tender, is able to apply for driving license or apply for any other legal document that they might need. So they are now playing on the same level as persons without disabilities, and this access is definitely facilitated by technology. It could be like my colleague Sandra. She's using the screen reader to access the WEZO website or any government website. And then a certain person has no disability, they're accessing the website on an equal basis. So she's able to participate in the tendering process. She's able to apply for a certain job. And all this is necessitated and facilitated by technology and its own and its tools. So definitely technology is an equalizer. I will strongly agree with that statement.
What do you think, Sandra?
I also agree with John that definitely technology is an equalizer, but then also with some caveats over there. So also looking at areas where maybe on the flip side, so, and especially when it relates to issues around accessibility.
Right.
So how tech can also become a barrier,
Right.
to persons with disabilities. When you talk about maybe websites that are not accessible to the diverse disabilities, maybe the screen readers or
Right.
or the easy to understand language or the fonts and contracts
Right.
and all of that. So in a way, technology is definitely an equalizer, but then one important aspect is to always recognize that accessibility of tech spaces then can either contribute to the meaningful engagement of persons with disabilities or can become a barrier. Yes.
I think
Very true.
in your case, Sandra, because you are visually impaired, these are things I don't think about. If somebody tells me a website, I just jump on and I go in and check it out. But when you talk about the reader screen, you called it?
The screen
Screen
reader.
reader.
The screen reader, sorry.
Yeah,
The
yes.
screen reader.
Yes.
It's not something I would automatically think about. Could you just give me an example of maybe one, somebody tells you about this amazing website and you want to go and check it out, and then you have issues accessing it.
Yeah.
And two, when a new tech comes out that can probably make it easier for you to access a lot of information, how do you get wind of it?
Okay, so referencing the screen readers, there are a number of screen readers currently, but then also depending on the device that you're using. So, for example, on the phone, you'd have the talkbacks on Androids and you'd have maybe voiceovers on iOS. When you're talking about maybe the laptop, then you'd have JAWS, you'd have the NVDA. So all of these are the screen readers. They're softwares that enable you to have a similar experience like that of persons without visual impairment. So they're able to read out everything that is on the screen for you. So now what happens is when there is a website or there is a platform that is not accessible, so once I do log in to such a website or a platform, then you'd find most of the things it will just be saying unlabeled, or it's not really describing, and maybe even let me give an example of, for example, TikTok. So TikTok is very visual. So most of the times you find if someone has posted maybe pictures or videos, all you'd hear is the sound, maybe the background sound, but then you're not able to see. So are people jumping? Are there words displaying on screen? And so there's a lot of information gaps around, how such a platform is relayed and how users with visual impairment are able to have a similar experience as other people. So looking at that as an example, and even at times like my colleague John has just mentioned, even websites from government portals, and looking at the how critical they are in terms of cascading information that are relevant to citizens, be it job applications, be it access to services. So the lack of accessibility of such a platform then it really creates such a big barrier, because then it means this whole population of persons with visual impairment then miss out on that information. And what on the flip side is for those who are able to access that information, then it increases a lot of dependency, because then I'd have to rely on someone to be able to come read for me. So again, it's reducing, the independent living aspects that we usually promote and advocate for persons with disabilities. So
I guess that's a caveat you're also talking about.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question before moving to John. You spoke about alienating the entire population. What is the current population in Kenya of persons with disabilities that you know of?
Okay. So in terms of population, currently, according to the 2019 census, we stand at almost, is it 2%, John?
2.2%.
Yes, 2.2% of people in Kenya right now are said to be persons with disabilities. But then, of course, there's a lot of discrepancies. And of course, this has been raised within the disability movement around those numbers. So those are the numbers that we have currently that are published. But then, of course, looking at previous statistics, then you do realize that the number could be more. So yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So John, let me ask you. Seeing as we're looking at tech here as an equalizer, what are the applications or programs that have been launched locally to sort of bridge this gap?
Right. And also maybe before I get into the answer to that, maybe just to add on to what my colleague is saying, specifically on the screen reader. A screen reader is an assistive technology, right? Yeah. A screen reader is going to assist a person who is using it, perhaps accomplish some business. Could be if you're accessing TikTok or accessing website and such. Now, the challenge comes into that, because when you're looking at accessibility issue, it's some sort of it's not one side show kind of a thing, because you would have a very good screen reader, for example, like you would have JAWS, the latest technology, or you would have the NVDF from Microsoft, the latest version of it. But the challenge would come in because, Joe, if you have a website that has been developed without baking in the accessibility angle in it, it doesn't matter what kind of screen reader you're going to have. It won't matter what kind of assistive technology you're going to have. You'll not be able to access this website. So you see, from developers' point of view, once they do the website and they leave it, and then there is now the service provider who is providing the technology, like the assistive, like the JAWS. These things have to work in tandem, because for a website to be accessible, there's actually a way you have to develop it.
Yeah.
From the very start, even the content, there's a way you have to do it. If they are headlines, there's a way you have to either use a headline one, there's a way you have to use those tags specifically for accessibility. So that when Sandy comes in with JAWS now can interact well with your website, because you developed it aiming at JAWS interacting with it. But you see this disconnect. You do a website and then JAWS comes in. JAWS is supposed to help you, but it cannot help you because this guy just developed a website. So there's that kind of a gap between different types of tech for inclusion. Maybe it's the production environment, that kind of linkage, and those are the things I think also the tech summit is also trying to look at, bringing together different kind of people to look at, trying to bring such gaps.
Yeah.
So that when you talk about accessibility, it can be all the way around, from the consumers to producers, the kind of 360. Referencing to the digital environment in our country today, maybe perhaps just to mention some programs around it, is that the assessment is that Kenya has really made some strides towards digital accessibility, and this is shown by the legal and policy frameworks, the laws and policies that are currently existing around the digital accessibility. The country, if you look at our Kenya Constitution, is envisioning things to do with access to information. It's envisioning things to do with non-discrimination. That could be in access to any kind of information. If you look at the persons with the disability policy, persons with the disability bill, these are envisioning kind of, they are promoting access to digital environment by everyone, including persons with the disability. Just looking at some guidelines and policy, actually from the KNBS, I think in the last 2 years or so, they developed some accessibility guidelines for the built environment. They developed 2 kind of standards.
That's a Kenya National Bureau.
Kenya National Bureau of Standards. They actually developed 2 standards regarding accessibility. One is for the built environment accessibility guidelines. This is now for when you're doing a building. Are you supposed to put a ramp? Are you supposed to outdoors should be wide? Those kind of things. The physical accessibility. And then they did another one for digital accessibility. Actually, when you are doing a website, digital accessibility standards. Like they are saying when you are doing a website and such kind of things, when you are developing digital products, these are the criteria that you need to meet for us to say that now you can say that your product is accessible. If you're developing a product, a tool, or even a service, for it to be to be said to be accessible, it needs to meet those standards developed by the Bureau of Standards. So in terms of even looking at the ICT policy 2019, it has a whole chapter actually talking about developing digital products that are accessible specifically to persons with the disability, our ICT policy. So in legal and policy framework, actually we've seen good movements around there. We've seen a lot of movements around there. The challenge definitely is definitely around the implementation. So with other policies, the implementation of these good policies and legal frameworks is just the implementation and funding of them to be implemented. I think that will be a major that's a major gap around that. What I've seen in our country now around the specific question that you're asking around programs, I've seen some organization. There's some organization state and also mostly non-state actors. I've seen some organization do some kind of capacity building for persons with the disability on digital literacy. These are gap. If you look at a person with disability, like Sandra has alluded, we are around 2.2% according to 2019 census. But definitely, according to the WHO, every population, 16% are persons with the disability. So definitely in our country, we're talking about millions of persons with the disability, or are likely going to be underserved because they cannot access the technology. So because they cannot access the technology. Looking at sealing, looking at how to seal this gap, and what I've seen is that some organizations, they have developed and implemented digital literacy programs to persons with the disability. Just bringing persons with disability together and then train them on digital access, the ICT issues, how do you access, and that kind of a thing. So asking about that's one of the programs I think that's doing some justice around trying to bridge the gap. Remember also Sandra mentioned that ICT can be a tool, for good, but also it can excavate the digital divide. It can increase it. But not trying to bridge it. We have seen some organization implementing those programs of digital literacy training. That's on the program side of it. On the real products of in the environment of the real tools or maybe the real application, we have seen some strides. But I wouldn't say we have seen explosion of innovations, not there yet, but we've seen some good steps towards that kind of innovation. Because maybe one of the tools I could mention is we have a tool called the Assist All tool or Assist All application. I think it's the Google Store. It was actually developed locally. So this tool, what it does is that it provides sign language interpretation on demand, right? Like, for example, even in our set, we had a person who is deaf and you do not have a sign language interpreter. You just need to log into the tool and there you will be provided by sign language interpretation by somebody on remote location. So that means if you have a person who is deaf in our set, they could still participate in our conversation on an equal basis because this tool, Assist All app, is providing such services online.
What did you say it's called again?
Assist All.
Assist All.
Assist everyone. Assist All.
Assist All
app.
So how does it work? I mean, if you have the Assist All, it's an app that you download.
It's an app. Actually, I think it's in Google Store.
Okay.
So you go to Google Store and then you can download it. And once you download it, you can log in as either service provider. Now, service provider is the sign language interpreter, or then just as a user of the service. That's just as a client. So at any moment you would like such interpretation of service, you just go to the app and you have those registered service providers there. Then you can raise one of them, and then you put on the video, and then they are able to see. A person who is deaf is able to see because there's audio.
Yeah.
If you are talking, the person on the other side, they are hearing, then they're interpreting, and then a person who is deaf is able to see on the screen what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of three-way conversation, but just basically like we would do when we have a deaf person here and a sign language interpreter. It's only that this one is on remote location.
So
Yeah.
for example, if we in this conversation,
Yeah.
if we were to employ the services of Assist All,
Yeah.
how would it work?
We will just go to the application right now, and then in the application, because they are registered already service providers, you raise one.
Okay.
There's a way the platform is configured for that.
Okay.
You go, you raise. Think of it as
It's like calling an Uber.
hailing a cab. Actually, I was just going to say that.
Okay.
The way you hail a cab.
Yeah.
Because I think they are certified, the sign language interpreters, so are in the application. You raise one, and then once you do that, then they start video connection.
So they can hear what's happening in our conversation, and they're able to do the sign language.
That is the thing.
Okay.
They will listen as I speak. They can hear like I'm making a phone call, right? They will hear, and then they will be interpreting now for the person who is deaf, who is seated there.
So you said that was produced locally?
It was. Locally? It was actually it was ended by this Science TV. Science TV.
Yeah. I think
Science TV.
Yes,
they
I think
spearheaded the development of that application, and I think it's been usage, but I wouldn't say it has not sort of exploded in the usage. But it's one of the. I was just given an example of where I think tech in our country is. Policy way too good. Innovation of products, we are getting there, because that would be a good example of what's happening locally. Okay.
I'm very curious about it now, because now I'm wondering, all those sign interpreters that you hail, or you call upon to explain a situation to you, how do they get paid?
They start component, definitely. They are providing a service.
Yeah.
So at the point of you racing, I'm not exactly sure where you negotiate definitely the payment of the services.
Maybe pay per hour, or you subscribe.
I think at the moment after racing them, then those are some of the logistics payment kind of a thing. Because definitely because I think they have not been sort of supported. If there's a program then to support their onboarding on the application, then they would be providing services for free, because there's somebody at the back end who has taken care of that. But I don't think if that has already happened. So at the moment, it could be the client who is asking for the service. It could be them negotiating the service provider on in terms of payments.
Yeah, I guess it also depends on the importance of the conversation you're trying to listen into.
Yeah, sure.
So as UDPK, how exactly do you contribute to the development of such technology? Because I'm sure they call upon you when it comes to the policies and the frameworks they try to create to get your opinion on that.
Yeah.
But how do you support, let's say, different individuals who are trying to come up with technology to make it easier?
Definitely. As an organization, one of our key things, as we were mentioning, on championing on participation of persons with disability on an equal basis, and understanding that ICT facilitate this kind of participation of persons with disability. We are at the forefront of ensuring the meaningful participation, and knowing tech is the facilitator in this kind of thing. So we involved a lot in this circle of innovation and assistive technology, and also assistive tech. So our involvement definitely ranges from us supporting some of the processes, and also us being involved in the development process. Because one of the key things I think I need to mention, and which I think is extremely important, is involvement of the users of the digital product that you are developing in the process. You have to ensure that the users are central to the product that you're developing. At the end of the day, they are going to use the service. So if you go through the development process without involving them, then you are developing a product that is not exactly meeting their need. So one of the key things we ensure and anticipate for is to mobilize persons with the disability to participate in the development processes. From the planning to the testing of these tools, we ensure that persons with the disability are involved in this process. So from our end, we mobilize their participation in the development of these digital products or the assistive technologies, but also depending on the program that we have, we also support and also encourage this kind of innovations, because we also work with a lot of also other innovative global kind of organizations who are in the tech space, because they also have a lot of interest around the disability inclusion tech. So working with them in the development of these products, sometimes we incorporate local organizations that also innovate. We have some local organizations that are really around just innovations on the tech. So we also create those kind of linkages. We have international organizations that has reached us out because we are the premier disability organization. But also we know we have an organization which is local organization that is in the forefront in the tech. So we also serve to create those kind of linkages. We ensure the local organization is linked to the international organization. So whenever they are requesting for funds and such, that we are still in that kind of chain, trying to provide resources for them to do the development of the tech.
I guess we're also able to authenticate.
We're part of the process. That on the authentication is part of having the users who are persons with the disability participate, because then after you develop the tech, you need to take it to the market, but then you need to do the validation of it, testing. We call it user testing. So you have user cases who are going to test. Those are persons with the disability, so we mobilize for them to participate in that process.
Yeah, and I think what would be interesting would be actually getting persons with disabilities themselves being the ones creating the technology and the applications for them to be used. I think we as we wind up, let me just ask you, Sandra, when you look at the tech space and you look at your role when it comes to gender and inclusivity, what are some of the challenges that you've experienced?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. But maybe just to also add on to what John has mentioned, and especially in terms of the roles that we also play in terms of that. So one key thing we also do is we also do accessibility audits. And when we talk about audits, like John has mentioned, we do walk the journey with the users. That's the development of all of these websites and all of these platforms. But then again, something we do recognize that there are people who may have already started that journey, and recognizing that there are gaps. So most of some of the organizations usually reach out to us to actually support in, auditing their platforms, the physical and virtual, to sort of identify where the gaps are. And we usually do this in partnership, of course, with the local organizations of persons with disabilities who have members that are persons with disabilities, identify the gaps, and actually make recommendations to those organizations in terms of their platforms. And we are able to walk the journey with them in terms of now how do they make that experience better, despite them not having included persons with disabilities at the forefront. So that's also another aspect. Then we also talk about, John has mentioned, we do a lot of work within the policy space. So even looking at last year, we had the ICT policy, being going out for public participation and all of that. So what's our role? Essentially ensuring that, persons with disabilities through representative organizations, have an idea of what is this policy promoting. So what are some of the provisions that are in place to secure the experience of persons with disabilities? So also being the policy landscape being a very critical area which we work around, and ensuring that persons with disabilities are actually aware of some of these legislations that are coming up, and areas where persons with disabilities really need to influence, and especially within, like, for example, the ICT policy. Another aspect is of course recognizing the trends globally and especially around tech right now, UDPK has also been very intentional in ensuring that, when we're talking about skilling, then we're not leaving people with disabilities behind. So we actually have a program that we've partnered with Sight Savers. So Sight Savers is an international organization that works around disability and development, and they have a base in Kenya. So we have a program called the IT Bridge Academy. So the IT Bridge Academy is essentially a skilling program that builds the capacities of young people with disabilities around specifically areas such as networking, cybersecurity. So that specification around the tech. So what they go through, it's almost a whole year program. So we onboard cohorts of participants who go through a series of trainings with professionals, who are trained within the CCNA courses. And right now we even have, a virtual program where they're also able to enroll from anywhere in the country and have, the similar experience. So what that then does, it equips young people with disabilities with relevant skills. Right now, when you talk about cybersecurity, networking, all of these are skills that are very relevant in today's market. So then the young people are able to become, web developers. Most of them have been placed in different tech organizations, like the likes of Safaricom, So looking at how we are also skilling and also linkages to now, those employment opportunities and those market spaces. So working together with, partners in terms of programming around the skilling, then also linkages to those employers. So a lot of employer engagements around, so we do have these young people with disabilities. They have been skilled, they have the soft skills together with, the skill set. And therefore give them a platform to actually show you what they can do. So those are just part of also what we do around that area.
Okay.
So then maybe now coming into your question around so issues around gender, and especially, so I do have a background in gender, and what I've noticed is, of course, the intersecting barriers that come with the aspect of you being a person with a disability and, a woman within the society. So first of all, of course, we have the issues around, the levels of education. And we are all aware that, women generally, and in terms of how, like even looking at it historically, have really been disadvantaged in terms of, access to education. So, and we do recognize that in terms of digital skilling and digital access, it's very closely linked to education.
Yeah.
So when you look at if a woman with a disability is not able to access education due to many reasons, among which may be, maybe issues around they're not able to afford education, or rather the education is not it's not inclusive. So let's say, for example, they're in a non-inclusive school which does not have the assistive devices that they require to be able to learn on an equal basis with others, then that means then they don't have access to education. And in turn, of course, then digital accessibility and digital skilling then also becomes a problem. Then second, of course, the cost that comes with it. So assistive technology comes at a cost. Like, for example, let me give reference to, for example, JAWS. For you to be able to load in JAWS to your device, you will not, it's not less than 50,000 Kenya shillings. So looking at, an average.
It's a one-off fee, or?
Yes, it's a one-off fee, but then the more the software upgrades, then you have to.
Yeah.
So it's quite a cost. So looking at how that can affect, accessibility of women within, like, let's look at an average woman at the county level, how that looks like for them in terms of cost. There are all these other recurrent expenditures that they do have to spend on. There are also all these additional costs that are attached to the fact that they have their disability. So looking at all of that, then it then then poses a question on digital access becoming a compromise. Will I it's either this or the other for them. Then also looking at the fact that we may not have as many role models within the tech space, who are persons with disabilities. Yes, they are there, but then how many women with disabilities do we have who are, currently working within the digital space? And then in terms of how well they showcase that and how well they also mentor young women with disabilities or women with disabilities to also, take up space within those platforms. So looking at all of those areas and just recognizing that, those intersecting barriers then contribute to the aspect around women not being engaged in tech. And of course, the reasons around, even for women without disabilities, the tech space, it's just maybe recently where we are seeing, there's some sort of emergence of women within that space. But previously, there was some sort of incline of more men towards that space than the women. So when you look at it now from the women with disabilities perspective, then it becomes, twice as hard now. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think let me just wind it up with a final question that both of you can answer. With regards to the tech summit that's coming up, one of the things that has been promised is that it's going to be a lot more useful. It's going to be a lot more practical than most conversations. So it's not just about talking, it's about seeing after we talk what's going to happen next. So maybe I can start with you, John, and finish with you, Sandra. If you could answer me this question, what exactly are you hoping to see, even if it's a miracle that comes and sits next to you? What are you hoping to see in this summit?
Yeah, definitely looking forward to the summit, because the summit is is a critical platform of stakeholders, where I'm hoping that it will bring different stakeholders together. This includes policymakers, developers, and users of tech together. So I'm hoping that the summit will definitely spark some form of conversation and a debate around where the innovation where the innovation in tech is going vis-a-vis disability. I'm also hoping to see if there will be any new innovations around disability, because what we have been seeing is that, as I mentioned, that the innovation space is not growing as we would like it to have been. So I'm hoping in the tech space that will be exposed to new innovations and new ways of addressing barriers that persons with the disabilities face. I'm also hoping that we'll get some commitment from policymakers, specifically on funding aspect of implementing the existing legal and the policy frameworks. And if we could have some framework of the stakeholders in the tech space around, working together, some sort of integrate, the gap I was talking about, some sort of having some action plan towards on how are we going to accelerate the development of technology in our country. That would be a very good thing to see. But also specifically on investment in assistive technology, are we going to see some some stakeholders coming up with the methods and proposals of investing in the new innovations? Are we going to see some participants coming up to say they are going to supply some incubation of some sort of a technology, something somewhere? So I think just looking forward to that kind of linkage, interaction, and the new innovation that could be coming out will be a great addition and a lot of value to participating in the summit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, John. Sandra?
I think much has been said by John, but I think one other thing I'm also looking forward to is having those discussions. So getting to hear where people are at in terms of the innovations and how much they have thought about inclusion. So having those engagements around, so what more needs to be done, who do we need to bring on board. So a lot of those partnerships that are geared towards ensuring that when you're looking at tech in the coming years, then we're looking at tech that is inclusive of everyone, including persons with diverse disabilities, and of course the accessibility needs that come with ensuring that they're able to have an equal experience with counterparts.
Okay.
So yeah. And in terms of those very the commitments from CSO actors and other partners to ensuring that we are leaving no one behind. I think that's what I would say.
And also some things like learning, because I understand that then we may have a global participants and all that, also learning about the best practices, like what has worked in a certain area, what are you guys doing, what are those best practices then we could domicile in our country to propel the tech space forward. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming and sharing with us. If you want to know more about what is happening here, please make sure that you follow us on all the places where you listen to podcasts so you can get to know more about the Innovate Kenya Tech Summit that's happening in March. Thank you very much. See you soon.